Hey, welcome back to another episode of Overflow, the Overflow podcast. Today joining me, Pastor Bryce Harper, our lead pastor,
Yay.
and Pastor Dr. Mike Courtney, all of the above, his every title here at Family Worship Center. So we're so excited. Today we're going to be kind of just going deeper into Pastor Mike's message that he just spoke on this past Sunday, entitled, The Best Tithing Sermon Ever.
Yes.
Or Running After God. So, let us know in the comments which one you think it is or kind of what you got out of it. You can kind of take your pick there. Running after God. We should be a people who run after God. We should be pursuing Him on a daily basis. And, man, this message, we were laughing, we were crying, we were laughing again, then we were crying. I mean, it was just a roller coaster of emotions, which is pretty typical when Pastor Mike speaks. So, which is great. We love that. We can just jump right in. I love you opened with a video.
Mm-hmm.
An illustration, and it was a video, and you can elaborate more on that, but it was a video of a little girl running across the field into her grandfather's arms, and her grandfather picks her up and embraces her, and then, you said, isn't that what the Father does with us?
Yeah.
When we pursue Him, when we run after Him, He picks us up, He embraces us in His arms, He forgives us, He shows us mercy, and right away I was like, okay, this is going to be a fight. I don't know where to go with this. This is going to be an amazing message. And so right away, the illustration was so impactful. Like, I was already like, oh my goodness, I was already in tears. Let's just jump right in. And with running after God, how did you get to that message? Is this something that you heard for a while? Did it drop in your spirit recently? And then let's talk about the illustration as well.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Danielle. Thanks for inviting me to talk about that. We usually do podcasts about a month now, not about one sermon. But let me back up and say this, which I think I said this in a staff meeting yesterday. One of the privileges that I have, and Pastor Bryce is a great preacher, but he's also very kind and generous, and about once every 4 or 5 weeks he'll ask me to speak. So one of the privileges I have is I have 4 or 5 weeks. Pastor Bryce, he has to do it. And I remember those days. Man, I'd preach a pretty good message on Sunday, and while everybody's saying that was a great message, I'm saying, I got to do it again next week. Yeah. Oh, brother, I got to start all over again. So I didn't say this on Sunday because it is kind of a personal thing, but I got a text from one of my daughters-in-law a couple of weeks ago from Jennifer, Josh's wife, and she was talking in that about her appreciation of the fact that I am a person who runs after God, and she has seen that, and she was saying it in the context of how she sees her husband, my son, do that, and she believes he got that from me. And so it was very kind email or text, but when you get that kind of thing, I just think, I don't know if that's true. I don't feel like that. I always thought that if I was going to be a old man close to God, I would feel closer to God. I don't. I feel like, man, I'm so short, so far away, and I just so this text prompted this good feeling. Thank you for saying that. But it also, for a couple of weeks, I just carried this. Oh man, it's just not true. I need to send her a text and say, you sent this to the wrong person. I'm not, you missed this. And then it was like a gift from God. After battling that for a couple of weeks, Doris came in and said, hey, look at this video that Betsy sent. And so I guess I had that on the back of my mind because I know Doris thought I was crazy. Right. But when I watched that video, I just began to weep. Right. And I thought that's exactly what it looks like. And little Chloe, she doesn't run very well, and she's all over the place, and she's just and yet Jeff is so eager to run towards her and to embrace. And I thought, yeah, that's right for all of us. We don't do very well, but it doesn't matter. He's after us. So that's kind of where all that came from. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that was good. That was going to be my question too. Was just how do you go about? Because I think you do an unbelievable. I mean, this is like by far the best teaching pastor ever. There's no doubt about that. And this might be redundant or just off script, but what is your just kind of process when you're formulating a message? I mean, just what's kind of like certain just triggers? You're like, okay, that's it. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm doing. You kind of talked about it Sunday too. Like, man, I put this message together, and then like Friday, I'm like, whoa, gosh, I got to do something else. This is not.
Yeah.
We're gonna show this video, and it's not gonna be very good, whatever. And then you're like, no, I'm gonna stick to it. What's kind of just, I don't know, just a little bit of your. I'm interested. This is like a personal question now, so you get to be a part of it. But what's a little bit of your process where you're like, yep, this is it, and these are my points, and here's the Bible, support, the biblical support and foundation. Here's the application.
I appreciate that, Pastor, and you do a great job. I think this podcast may go a whole different direction, but I think there's two things now and then. Back then, and we've talked about this quite a bit. I always would preach in a series of some sort, and you do a great job of doing that. I think that helps people to kind of get the whole picture. You can't say on one Sunday all the things you want to say about stewardship or about holiness or about being filled with the Spirit or any of those things. So to do a series, and so I would be living in that. I'm gonna preach a series on Ephesians. So I would just be reading Ephesians. I would just be living in that over and over and over again.
That's good.
Now where it's just kind of a one-off more, although I do try to tie into what you're doing.
Yeah.
So out of my own devotional life, out of what God is saying to me each day, something will come up, and it's just like the Holy Spirit says, "This is it." And you all know, I mean, Danielle, you've been around me. I am not particularly profound. I say one thing. I take about 35 minutes to say it, but I say one thing.
It's always good.
Here's
and it
the
blows
one
our mind.
thing.
We're like, what? That's crazy.
And so that one thought that God will say, this is it. This is the one thing I want you to say. Then I always say it's very much like baking a cake.
Yeah.
Then I just kind of put it in a bowl and I start throwing stuff in. Oh man, that video, I bet that fits with that. And I remember this poem that I learned when I was a kid. I bet that fits with that. And I just start throwing stuff in and stir all the ingredients up. On my approach is on Thursday, that's when you bake the cake. On Thursday I work on it, work on the sermon. And yes, I always said Thursday night I come home and say, this is the greatest message that has ever been preached. This is absolutely the greatest thing. And then about Friday afternoon, I go to Doris and say, this is awful. It's horrible. And, it's usually somewhere in between. It's hardly ever the greatest message. It's usually not the worst message. It's somewhere in between. So I think there is that out of your own devotion. Well, one more thing, and then I'll shut up. So I was in my devotions this morning. I'm reading in 1 John chapter 1. And John says, that which we have seen and heard, which our eyes have seen, our hands have touched, this we proclaim to you. Yeah. And so I wrote a little note to Amos. I'm in Amos's Bible. I wrote a note and said, Amos, you can't give what you don't have. You've got to be in. And I think that whether it's preaching or teaching or doing podcast or whatever we do, we have got to be, to bring this all the way back, you got to be running after God. Yeah. You got to be pursuing Him, because out of that is where the stuff comes that He wants you to share.
Yeah. I definitely asked that because I knew kind of like a little bit of what the answer would be. I knew because you've told me, like, I preach where I'm at. Like I preach out of like what God's kind of saying to me, what God's saying to me. And I think for anybody who's teaching or speaking or preaching, that's just like, that is just fundamental 101 when you're, delivering a message. You definitely got to deliver it from just where you're at, wherever that might be. And that might be the mountaintop, it might be the valley, like whatever it is. But a lot of times that's where people are at, and that's what they need to hear. They need to hear what's going on in your heart and in your life. And I guess the other thing, I'm always curious every time you speak, how much does Doris just rake you across the coals because you're just
we usually drive in two cars the day that I'm going to speak.
So Pastor Mike is always joking, always making jokes about Doris, his wife, throughout the message that are like so untrue, and everybody knows it. And I love looking over to Doris, and Doris is just going,
Yeah.
Like, and everyone's dying laughing, but
I'm like the guy that said, "What color are your wife's eyes?" I say white. She's always rolling her eyes. That's all. I tell you, when Doris and I married, she was so painfully shy. I mean, really could hardly carry on a conversation with someone she didn't know. And then, God said, "Hey, watch this. This will be really funny. I'll make him a pastor and her a pastor's wife." and it was so hard. And so I began to do that. I began to pick on her and tease her because immediately after the service,
You're just helping her.
I am. This is out of the goodness of my heart.
Right, exactly.
Immediately after the service, people would run up to her and start, "Oh, you poor thing. I can't believe she did." And that's how she would engage. Well, that was 45 years ago, and now it's just she's pretty outgoing now, but it doesn't matter. She's still going to get the...
That is awesome.
Yeah, I guess I do say every once in a while stuff about her that I...
It's always so good because it's like so not even close to being true. So it's always so funny.
Of having in a serious moment, having some humor embedded in there, it loosens people up to receive more. I feel like, and so it's just a great strategy.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Thanks.
But yeah, running after God.
Yeah, that's right.
Running after God. You posed 3 questions in this message, and then you gave 3 stories, biblical stories from, for example, the first question you posed was, what keeps us from running after God?
Yeah.
Really
there's
good.
a lot of things that can come up that keep us from running after God, and it's things we do to ourselves. You said pride, people, and possessions.
Yeah.
So do you just want to elaborate on those 3 things? What keeps us running after God?
Yeah, that's good, Danielle. My imagination is that we all want to. I mean, those of us that call ourselves Christ followers, and if we make the effort to be in a church and have a Bible on our coffee table and that, I think we want to.
Yeah.
But we don't. We don't. And when I say we, I mean me. I don't. There's sometimes I think, man, what's the deal here? It's been 3 or 4 days. I haven't been very good in my devotions. I haven't. So I think there must be something that keeps me from running after it. Now, obviously, we could do the big metaphysical. It's the the prince of this world and all that. But on a more practical level, and so I told the story of blind Bartimaeus, who begins to run after God. He begins to yell, "Jesus, thou son of David, have mercy on me." And that's got to be embarrassing. It's got to be. Listen, I'm still an infant in the Pentecostal church, and there's sometimes God lays something on my heart to do it, and I think, "Oh God, that's embarrassing," and God will do it anyway. So our pride just keeps us. I know I should go deeper. I know I should pray more. I know I should witness to this person beside me, but I don't. So my pride. The second thing is people. I said in the message, the better you get, the worse I look. So I don't want you to get too good. So we have a tendency to say, let's just all be mediocre. When I was in school, that straight A student, I'd try to take them behind the gym, wear them out every day. Say, listen, quit making those great. You're hurting the curve.
Yeah.
And so people do. And then finally, possessions. We just, and I tried to, again, in light of Pastor's great series on Are You Wealthy, Are You Rich? There is nothing wrong with boats and cars and golf clubs and second houses and all. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes it can keep me so busy that I don't have time to pursue God the way I want to. And so Bartimaeus, I just love that little seemingly insignificant fact in there that John says, and he threw away his cloak and went after Jesus. My imagination is he's a beggar. That's the only thing he had. He just said, I'm throwing it all away. So I do think that stopping and looking at my life and saying, I do want to pursue God. Why do I not do that? And examining that's important.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what else to add to that. It was just...
Sorry, I talked too much.
It's just... No, it's so good. And I was thinking there was a message I've heard someone preach before. I think they were talking about blind Bartimaeus. I don't know if this is factual or not. I was about to like try to research it real quickly, but something about during that time that blind people had a certain garment that they wore, so people knew that they were blind, and that when he took off his cloak, I don't know if you've ever heard.
It does seem like I've heard that before. Yeah.
And so there was this illustration, so like there is just this possibility that when he took off his cloak, what he was saying was, I'm no longer, like before he even got there, like he took off his cloak that signified that he was blind. I'm taking this off because I'm running after. This is all about the change. Yeah. And so just kind of like, again, running after God, this is what I'm going after Jesus, and not like I am by faith taking this off and going after Him. Right. And so I remember hearing that preached before and being like, man, that's really powerful. And so I don't know how true that is.
We've never let facts interfere with a great sermon illustration before. So
that's just powerful. So
that really is. Yeah, it's like in this day and age, if he's throwing his cane away, a blind man's throwing his cane away before he ever gets to Jesus. Yeah. That's good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's gonna happen. I'm already. Yeah.
And you also said when you have a chance to pursue Jesus, you better do it.
Well, just a side note is that in that story, at least biblically, we don't ever know of Jesus coming back to Jericho again. Yep. So this is, in many ways, this is blind Bartimaeus' one shot to run after Jesus. And so in our services, back to the pride thing and all of that, Pastor Bryce does a great job in the transition, and the Holy Spirit just moves, and God is speaking, and I think, well, I got stuff I need to do today. I'm waiting for the service to end. It'll be good next week, and we just don't know. Yeah, we don't know. So when you get a chance to run after God, you need to do it. You need to pursue Him.
Absolutely. Even during worship, I think sometimes like they're doing a song and I want to get up there and jump around, and I got like this TYM like spirit in me, but then no one else is doing it, so I'm like, should I do it? And then so it's just like not caring about pride or what people think about you. Like truly, like where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, and you should be free in that place. And so that's just kind of what that made me think of in
That's
that.
Good.
But
All right, Danielle, you help me run after God. I stand on the opposite side of the sanctuary from you and see you up there pursuing Him like that. Yeah. And I think, wow,
it's very encouraging.
I want to do that. I want to run.
Join me this Sunday.
Well, I'm too old to jump. My knees. Yeah, one jump and my knees would collapse.
One jump.
I'm jumping on the inside.
Right. I appreciate it. Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate that. Okay, so the second question, let's get into that. You said, how do you run after God? So in all these things, what keeps us from it? But then once we get past that, how do we pursue Him? And you honestly kind of went back to the prayer worship word almost. Yeah. Where you said, know His word, so stay in the Bible. Know His ways, stay on your knees, stay in prayer, and then know His will, so stay in His service, which would be worship, but also impact, serving, those kinds of things. So do you want to just talk about that for a little bit, making an impact, praying, being in His word, and pursuing Him?
Yeah, the story I chose there was Peter in John 21 when Jesus comes to the seashore. They're out fishing. Peter has said, Jesus has been crucified, resurrected, and Peter said, "Man, I'm done. Let's go fishing. I'm going back to my old ways." And Jesus comes and they fish. They don't catch anything. Jesus says, "Hey, throw your net on the other side." They catch a lot of fish, and then John recognizes him and says, "It's the Lord." And Peter, this is interesting. We could probably do a whole study. Bartimaeus throws his cloak off. John puts his cloak on, which is kind of an interesting. You could do some stuff.
It is very
that,
interesting.
That sometimes sometimes you have to pick some stuff up to go run after God, and he dives in, goes and run after God. And so the thought that came to my mind is, and in that when Jesus says, "Throw your net on the other side," Peter hears that voice. He recognizes the voice, and I want to be in that place where I hear the voice of God, and I recognize it. I mean, we hear the voice of God all the time, but we don't recognize it. Where I recognize that voice, and the best way I know to do that is through His Word. I know there are times. There have been a few times in my life where I have felt like God just almost audibly spoke to me and said, go here or do this, but most of the time, God speaks to me out of His Word, and so to stay faithful in the Word is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And then prayer on your knees. The story of him throwing the net on the other side is similar to the story of when Jesus meets him for the first time.
Yep.
And says, throw your net on the other side, and he catches fish.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't say throw on the other side, he just throw your net in again.
Mm-hmm.
And so to stay in a position, I love Pastor Bryce's word posture. Pastor Bryce uses the word posture a lot. Yeah. To stay in a posture of being on my knees, staying before God in prayer, so that I can recognize what He's doing. Right. I can see Him doing stuff. Mm-hmm. And I have a great friend who says, sometimes we've been praying for healing or something like that, and somebody will come in and say, well, what was your doctor's report? Was it cancer or not? And he said, oh, no, I shouldn't have bothered you with prayer. It wasn't cancer. And my friend will say, if God had healed, it would look a lot like that.
Yeah.
And so to be in a place where I recognize, oh man, this is God's healing. I got a check back from the IRS right when my transmission went out of my. Mm-hmm. Oh, wasn't that lucky? Oh, that was such a. Well, if God had been working, it might have looked a lot like that.
Yep.
So to be in that place where I can see this is God working. Peter, I think, recognized that. And then the final thing, is our vision statement here at the church is believe, belong, impact. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to follow God sincerely and eagerly without trying to help other people, without making a difference in other mm-hmm. people's life. And so to stay in this place of service where I'm constantly looking. So I don't always do this, but I drive by the guy that's sitting on the corner holding up a sign, say, hey, can you help somebody out? They used to say, we'll work for food. Now they just say, I'll be honest, I need a beer, so can you help me out?
Yeah.
And I don't think that you need to give money to them all the time. I think you need to think about it. Yeah. I think when you drive by, you need to say, God, am I supposed to help that person mm-hmm. out? And so living in that kind of position where Peter remembers that what Jesus said to him is, hey, you're going to be a fisher of men. And that's what we're supposed to do. And to make a very shameless plug, there are places you can do that, the YMCA and Habitat for Humanity and Greenhouse Ministries and all that. But for a couple thousand years now, the church has been a pretty good place to find a place to serve. Mm-hmm. And so I encourage people to jump into their church. And as pastor always says, it doesn't have to be this church, but jump into a church and get a job and work in the nursery or be on the tech team or be an usher, serve, find a way to serve.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something that keeps coming back, like when you were talking about that, hearing the voice of God, there's so much, like He's always speaking. I don't think that's the thing, but there's so much noise, in our own minds that we put there of like the world and like all these things, even going back to like pride people, all these things. And so it just getting silent and letting Him speak and like speaking through the silence. Mm-hmm. And so, just letting His voice break through all those things. And that comes from being in His Word and getting a revelation, being in prayer, and then also serving others. You can hear from God, like when you're like, I love serving because of being raised like that and like being in the church and stuff, making an impact. Like I see the benefits of that, of seeing people's lives transformed, and then me personally. And so I'm like, is prayer, worship, word.
Mm-hmm. Good, yeah.
Believe, belong, serve.
Yeah. Be still and know that I'm God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Psalm 46:10 is my favorite verse.
Yeah. It's making me think too.
Hey, Danielle cry.
That's right. Psalm 46:10. Oh my gosh.
Might have to read it.
Right. Be still. Oh, so good.
You were talking about kind of in your preparation about there's just times where I know I'm close to God, I just don't feel like I am. I get this text message and things like that. And it was just making me think like, man, that feeling that you get, man, that's not from God. That's not to think like, man, I'm less than, and just thinking about how, we are the beloved of God, and just thinking about too, like, in Revelation, return to your first love, and all that, the Church of Ephesus and things like that. And man, when you're in love with God, you're not thinking, well, I don't know if I'm, like, I think about my relationship with my wife, like, man, we love each other. There's no kind of trying to figure, like, we love each other. Right. And so, so yeah, I think when you kind of said, like, I just had this like feeling, and we all go through. I mean, there's just times where I have no rhyme or reason why. I'm just like, I feel that way. I just feel like, like when you were talking about Sunday, I want to be that little child running after God. I want to be so unadulterated, unfiltered, whatever, jaded, tainted. I just want to just purely, just fall in the embrace of God. Whatever reason, whether it's me or something else that just kind of gets in the way. I just want to be like that. And I think so many times, we can simply do that. And I think whether it's westernized Christianity, religious, whatever, people's experiences, church hurt, all those kind of things, like you were mentioning, that's just like a lot of noise. But what is, God's nature? What is his his posture towards, us? And just allowing God to describe himself, allowing him to define himself. And a lot of times and I love when we like read through the Bible as a church and things like that, because you'll hear things like, oh, the God of the Old Testament, he just killed, and he just, all this kind of stuff. And like, I read through the Bible and I go, man, he just kept giving them chances, and he kept giving them chances,
grace after grace,
and so many times you read through the Old Testament and they did evil in the sight of the Lord, like through judges or whatever, and like this generation came, they didn't serve God, this generation, and then and things went bad, and they didn't, and he gave him another chance, and he sent a deliverer, and like you see that, and it was like over, and I'm reading it going, he is so patient with creation that he is like, once again, another 100 years, I'm still, and kind of at the end, kind of like what you were talking about, like the illustration with your son, like I'm here, I'm watching, I'm waiting, I am ready. Like, and I think about that with my daughters growing up in this world, which is just crazy. And there's just a lot of things. And I always think to myself, no matter what they do in life, wherever they go, whatever the case may be, kind of fall away from, I don't know about God, whatever. I know they will always be my daughter.
Right.
So like, nothing you can believe in God, not believe in God, whatever, but you'll still always be my daughter. There's nothing you can do to change that. You can confess whatever you want to confess, but the fact is, you'll always be my child. And so I think a lot of times that's the case with us. There's a lot of times we go through little moments and seasons, but we're always God's children, and He's always ready, waiting.
That's good. You do a good job of reminding us of that too. And I tease sometimes you all. I was just sitting here thinking that, so if you added, there's 3 of us in the room. If you added 2 of your all's age, you're still only about 2/3 of the way to where I am. I'm the old person in this room. But I think part of the joy of being in a younger church, and our church is getting younger, and I'm grateful for that, but having a dynamic young pastor and having a incredible young, what do you do, Danielle? Technical director, really. Is that as we get older, we tend to say, well, we've always done it this way. This is the way God has to work. This is what it's supposed to look like. And so to see God come in unbelievably new and different ways and know that He's pursuing me over and over and over again. It's really good.
Right. Well, and I want to give you and your generation props in that we would not be here or be in the position that we are in without you and people. And I said on Next Gen Sunday, like, I would not be who I am without, an older generation praying for me, like all these different things. So I want to thank you and your generation for that as well, for everything. And it's something, going back to ministry, running after God, I hope this is encouragement to some people. I feel like maybe not stereotypes the right word, but when people look at pastors or people in ministry, they think they've got it all together. They're running after God. But we don't have it all together. You know, at least
Good.
me. Like, I don't know how y'all feel, but I don't have it all
pretty
figured
much
out.
do.
Yeah. Pastor
That's why
Mike's,
Mike's here.
he's set apart. Like, he's different. But, you know, we are still pursuing God. We're still running after him. We still want that. You know, we're not at the top of our, you know, all these things. And so I hope that's just encouragement to some people, you know, to continue to pursue him. You know, I'm not a pastor, but I am in ministry and I work at the church and stuff.
Absolutely.
But I'm still pursuing him and learning things. Obviously, I'm very young, but like every single day learning something new. And I think, you know, every time you go back and read scripture again, I could read the same verse 5 times, but I'll read it that 6th time and I get something completely different out of it. And so, just continue to pursue him and run after him.
Yeah.
Good.
It's really good.
Yeah. So I love it.
Good.
Well, let's jump into question number 3.
Okay.
Question number 3, what happens when we run after God? And you use the example of the prodigal son, which is probably the number one story you think of when running after God or, you know, pursuing him. So what happens when we do that? We realize that he's waiting. We realize that he's watching. And we realize that he's running as well.
Yeah.
And that he's running to us.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Well, I love that story because it's a story about me. You know, I think all of us probably at one time or another have felt like the prodigal, but I have a PhD in it. I was way out there, and God was so faithful and so gracious. It's hard for me to do this without tearing up here and now, but that idea that when the son finally gets out of the pig pen, you know, again it's throwing off stuff and taking on stuff, and he throws off the filthy clothes that he's had on, my you know, what I believe is, and then he starts towards the Father. And I can imagine that at first, you know, I used to go home after school when I was been in trouble during the day, and I knew, man, I'm just dragging and shuffling my feet. I'm trying to take as long as I can, and he's going slow and just dragging, and then he gets closer and he picks up the pace, and finally, as he crests the hill, he just says, man, I'm going home, and he's at a dead run. And to his surprise, he crests the hill, and he sees the Father running towards him, coming after him. So the Father has been waiting all along. Every day goes out and waits, and he's been watching. You know, you could do all kinds of things with that story, but in this day and age, you know, the Father was probably Venmoing some money to the pig owner, saying, "Hey, you know, give him a little nice slop today." Yeah. And there's so many times in my life I can look back and see where God was intervening and God was protecting and God was putting people in my path, and then he was running toward him. So I told a story of that was, again, one of those things when you're baking the cake. Jacob, and I told him I was going to tell this story, so I kind of got his tacit permission to do this. Jacob, my youngest son, who is now an airline pilot, has 2 children of his own, lives in Atlanta, but he was playing here in Nashville. He's a professional musician for a number of years, about 12 years. And he was going through a really difficult time, and he was on New Year's Eve. He had to play, and so I just didn't want him to drive home from downtown Nashville. He was still living in our house. I didn't want him to drive home by himself. So I said, Jacob, I'm going to go with you. So I went with him. He starts work about 10 o'clock at night and plays till 3 o'clock in the morning. And so we parked in the library. If you've ever been to Tootsie's downtown, the best parking place. For those of you watching the podcast that want to go to Tootsie's next week, the best parking place is the Nashville Library parking garage. So we park in the parking garage, and I would sit in the car and sleep for 20 or 30 minutes. And then I'd set my alarm, and I would get up, and I would walk in front of the big plate glass window at Tootsie's, and I had my phone. I would just turn the light on my phone. I would wave it, and Jake would wave. But what I was saying to him is, when you're ready, when you're done, I'll be here, and I don't want you to go home by yourself. Yeah. And the Father has done that for me so many times. Been waiting and watching and running after me.
Yeah. It's good.
I'm getting chills right now. I'm like, man, that story. Wow.
It's
Man.
always so
Well,
good.
he's done it for me. He
Right.
has
He's
over
done
and
it for
over
me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Man, God is a runner.
He
And
is.
he runs
Yeah.
after you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that the interesting thing?
Right.
Man, this whole sermon is about running after God. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's not.
Right.
It's about God running after me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So powerful.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Pastor Mike, I thank you for this and, for being, I've said it, I'm honored to be on staff with you and the wisdom and you
Yeah.
sharing with our church. And so this message, it was so powerful. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
thank
you,
you both for joining us on this episode today.
Thank you. It's always fun to be
Yes,
with Pastor Bryce.
absolutely. All right. We'll see you guys in the next one.